Rachel Morgan stood behind the counter at the little coffee shop where she spent most of her days, pouring a caramel latte into a paper cup. Outside, the Texas sun was blazing, the heat pressing against the windows like a reminder of how heavy the world could feel. Inside, though, it felt colder somehow. Rachel's hand brushed against the folded invitation, tucked deep into her apron pocket. She had read it so many times the edges were beginning to wear. Ethan and Vanessa cordially invite you to their engagement celebration. And right below, scrawled in Ethan's messy handwriting, "For Sophie's sake, please come." Her jaw clenched. She didn't need to read it again to feel the familiar twist in her stomach. Sophie, her daughter, just 9 years old. The only reason Rachel was even considering walking into what she already knew would be a pit of humiliation. Ethan had left when Sophie was still a baby, walking straight out of their lives and into Vanessa's arms. Vanessa, who had once been Rachel's closest friend. Vanessa, who had smiled at Rachel's baby shower and stolen her husband before the ink on the marriage certificate was dry. Now, the two of them were hosting their engagement party at a vineyard just outside of Napa. Big, fancy, expensive. The way Rachel's life had never been. And yet, here was Ethan, playing his card perfectly, knowing Rachel wouldn't refuse for Sophie's sake. Not because Rachel forgave him, not because she had any illusions left about how they viewed her, but because, no matter how many times life knocked her down, Rachel Morgan refused to let her daughter think she hadn't tried. That night, sitting cross-legged on the worn carpet of their small apartment, Rachel watched as Sophie carefully colored a sketch of a unicorn. "Hey, sweet pea," Rachel said softly, brushing a stray curl from Sophie's forehead. "You remember the party your dad invited us to?" Sophie looked up at her, eyes bright. "At the vineyard? Do we get to go?" Rachel forced a smile. "If you want to, baby, we'll go." Sophie nodded, hopeful. I just, I miss him sometimes, Mom. I want to see him." Rachel swallowed the ache rising in her chest. "I know, honey." She reached for Sophie's hand and squeezed it gently. "But listen, whatever happens that day, no matter what anyone says, we hold our heads high. You and me, we're a team." Sophie nodded again, this time more seriously. "We're family," she said, and Rachel's heart ached at how much strength her daughter already carried. The next morning, Rachel stood in front of the mirror staring at the reflection of a woman who had been through more than she ever thought she could survive. She picked the best dress she owned, a simple dark green wrap that fit well enough and looked clean. No sequins, no shimmer, just solid, steady fabric and a woman who would not back down. She twisted her hair up into a soft bun, dabbed on the lightest touch of lipstick, and stood back to assess herself. "You're stronger than this," she whispered to her reflection. When Saturday arrived, Rachel's nerves were tight enough to snap. She helped Sophie smooth the skirt of her light yellow dress, tying the little bow at the back, adjusting the denim jacket Sophie refused to leave behind. "You look beautiful," Rachel said, kissing the top of her head. "So do you, Mom," Sophie replied without hesitation, her sweet honesty cutting right through Rachel's anxiety. As they climbed into the Uber that would take them to the sprawling vineyard, Rachel realized she was gripping Sophie's hand a little too tightly. Sophie gave her a gentle squeeze back, her small fingers steady. "Remember," Sophie said quietly, looking up at her mom with wide, knowing eyes. "We're a team." Rachel smiled through the lump in her throat. "Yeah, baby," she said softly. "We are." The invitation arrived on a rainy Thursday, tucked neatly into my mailbox between a water bill and a flyer for discount pizza. I stood there in the doorway, umbrella dripping onto the tile floor, staring at the envelope like it might explode in my hands. "Caroline Davis and James Whitaker request the honor of your presence." Honor. The word felt like a joke. I turned the card over, half expecting there to be some mistake, some wrong address. But no, the name on the envelope was mine. It wasn't just my name, though. Right beneath it, scrawled in the same elegant cursive, was "And guest Tyler Bennett." My son. They had the nerve to invite both of us. I felt my jaw tighten, my fingers clench around the thick, overpriced cardstock. The gold embossing, the flowery script, it all felt like one big performance, and yet I knew exactly why they sent it. This wasn't about family, it was about power. It was about making sure I showed up, sat quietly in the back, and watched Caroline walk down the aisle in a designer gown, acting like the perfect princess, while I, the ex, the outsider, the single mom, was just another face in the crowd. I wanted to tear the damn thing in half. I wanted to toss it straight into the trash. But when Tyler came home from school that afternoon, his cheeks red from the wind, his little sneakers squeaking on the floor, he spotted the invitation sitting on the counter. "Is that from Aunt Caroline?" he asked, his voice soft. I nodded. His eyes searched mine. "Is Dad gonna be there?" The question felt like a punch to the chest. I swallowed hard and managed a small nod. "Yeah, he will." Tyler bit his lip, then looked down at his shoes. "Can we go?" I froze. I wanted to say no. I wanted to protect him, protect myself. But the hope in his voice, the way he clung to the chance of seeing his dad even for just a few minutes, how could I take that away from him? "Okay," I said quietly, forcing a smile. "We can go." His whole face lit up. "Thanks, Mom." He didn't know the battle going on inside me. Didn't know how much it would cost me to walk into that ballroom full of people who thought I was less than nothing. But for him, I would show up. I would smile, and I would hold my head high. Because if there was one thing I promised myself after the divorce, it was that Tyler would never see me break. I felt the burn of humiliation spread through my chest as Beverly's voice dripped with fake sweetness across the ballroom speakers. The polite laughter from the crowd stung like needles. Every eye turned toward me, waiting, almost eager to see me crack, to watch me confirm their beliefs about who I was, about where I belonged. Michael sat a few tables away, his gaze firmly fixed on the floor, doing what he always did best: nothing. I could barely breathe. My fingers clenched so tightly around the linen napkin in my lap I thought I might tear it in two. The lump in my throat was too big to swallow. I wanted to grab Tyler's hand and run, walk right out of that place, let them keep their cruel little games. But when I turned my head, I saw him. Tyler. My son's chair scraped loudly against the marble floor as he stood, steady and unflinching, every head swiveling toward him. His small shoulders were squared, his chin lifted just slightly, enough to tell me that whatever was about to happen, I needed to let him do it. "I have a present for the bride," he said, his voice clear and strong, ringing out across the sudden hush of the hall. For a moment, no one moved. Caroline's smile froze on her face. Beverly's grip tightened on the microphone. I felt my heart stop. Tyler walked toward the stage, his little hands trembling just barely as he climbed the steps. He stood behind the microphone, barely tall enough to reach it, but there was no fear in his eyes. Only something sharp, fierce. "Please stop making fun of my mom." The room was so still you could have heard a pin drop. My breath caught in my throat as Tyler's voice filled the space, steady, unwavering, though his hands gripped the edge of the microphone stand like he might break it in two. "My mom works hard every single day," he continued, his voice growing louder, stronger. "She wakes up early to pack my lunch, helps me with my homework even when she's too tired to stand. She takes care of me all by herself because my dad decided we weren't good enough for him anymore. And still, she never complains. Not once." I could feel my hands shaking now, not from anger, from the overwhelming pride and heartbreak colliding inside me all at once. "But nobody has the right to treat her like this." A soft murmur rolled through the crowd. Beverly took a step forward, trying to keep her plastic smile intact. "Sweet boy," she cooed, her voice sugar sweet. "Why don't we save the grown-up talk for later? How about some ice cream? Chocolate? 2 scoops?" Tyler didn't blink. "I don't want ice cream," he answered, his tone hard as stone. "I want people to stop treating my mom like she doesn't matter, because she does." I could feel the air shift. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Others lowered their eyes, but Tyler wasn't finished. "I wasn't going to say anything today," he admitted, his little fingers tightening around the mic. But after what you just did, Grandma Beverly, I think everyone here deserves to know the truth. I sat frozen in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. Tyler turned his eyes toward Caroline, then Michael. He took a deep breath, his voice steady as steel. 3 days ago, he began, I went to Aunt Caroline's house. I was dropping off a letter Mom forgot to mail. Dad's car was there. The color drained from Caroline's face. The door was open a little. I heard them talking inside. Caroline's lips parted, but no words came out. Michael's knuckles whitened as he gripped the edge of the table. I recorded it, Tyler said simply. Then, without hesitation, he pulled his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen, and held it up to the microphone. There was a crackle of static. Then Caroline's voice rang out, unmistakable. Mike, I want to see Jenny's stupid face at the wedding. I'll write single mother waitresses and humiliate her in front of everyone. The plan is perfect. Beverly is on board too. Gasps shot through the room. Someone dropped a glass. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. My breath felt caught halfway between my chest and my throat, burning. The recording continued. Michael's voice quieter but clear. Be careful. What if people find out you're pregnant with my child? The room erupted into chaos. A woman screamed. Chairs scraped. Someone knocked over a centerpiece. James, the groom, sat frozen, staring blankly ahead, his face pale as death. I barely heard the shouts. I barely felt the world spinning around me. All I could see was my son, standing tall, speaking the truth when no one else had the courage to. The ballroom was chaos, the kind of silence that hits right after a bomb goes off, the sharp inhale before the screaming starts. James, the groom, was motionless, his face pale, hands trembling slightly where they rested on the table. Slowly, as if moving through molasses, he turned his head toward Caroline. Is it true? His voice barely above a whisper, but loud enough for the entire hall to hear. Caroline's lips quivered. James, sweetheart, Tyler is just a child. He must have misunderstood. But Tyler didn't hesitate. He didn't back down. His small hands held the phone steady, his eyes locked on hers like a prosecutor delivering the final blow. I heard you. I recorded you. Caroline's face crumpled as if those words crushed the last ounce of defense she had. The groom's father rose to his feet, his jaw clenched, his voice firm. Son, we're leaving. James blinked, still frozen. The guests started shifting in their chairs, whispering, leaning into each other, their eyes bouncing between Caroline and Michael like spectators at a car crash they couldn't look away from. Number James, please. Caroline gasped, lurching forward, grabbing at his hand. I love you. It was a mistake. I was scared. James shook his head, hollow laughter breaking from his lips. A mistake? You're pregnant with my fiancé's brother's child, and your plan was to let me marry you anyway. She reached for him again, but James pulled his hand away, sliding off the wedding band as if it burned his skin. He placed it on the table in front of her with slow, deliberate care. Enjoy your big day, Caroline. Without another word, he turned and walked out. His parents followed. Then a wave of guests began to rise from their seats, the room thinning out as whispers turned to angry murmurs and disgusted glares. I could barely process what was happening. My heart raced so hard it hurt. Caroline stayed seated, crumpled over the table, sobbing into her manicured hands. Michael sat down heavily, his shoulders slumped, eyes downcast. When Caroline turned to him, choking out, Michael, do something. Say something. He just ran a hand down his face, shaking his head. There's no point denying it, he muttered. It's true. The air sucked out of the room. Caroline's sob turned into a ragged wail. She clutched at his sleeve like a drowning woman, desperate for someone to pull her back from the wreckage. But Michael didn't even look at her. You told me you loved me, she cried. I told you what you wanted to hear, he shot back, his voice hard now. But the truth's out. Across the room, Beverly stood frozen, the pearls around her neck catching the light as if they were mocking her. She opened her mouth, finally finding her voice, but it wasn't the calm, queenly tone she had used before. It was sharp, panicked. You absolute fools, she hissed. Do you have any idea what you've done? The disgrace you've brought on this family? Michael let out a bitter laugh. Learned it from the best, Mom. That hit her like a slap. And in that moment, watching her world collapse around her, the mighty Beverly, the woman who'd spent years looking down her nose at me, treating me like trash, stood there as small as a child, drowning in the weight of her own shame. I don't know what made me stand. Maybe it was rage, maybe pride, maybe love. I rose slowly, steadying my breath. Tyler's little hand found mine under the table. His grip was small but strong. I looked Beverly dead in the eye. You tried to humiliate me today, I said. My voice was calm, even. You tried to turn me into a joke in front of all these people. But here we are, and it turns out the only people who should be ashamed are you and your children. She opened her mouth, but for once had nothing to say. I turned my gaze to Michael. You left me because I wasn't good enough for you, I continued, my voice soft but cutting. But look at you now. You destroyed everything yourself. Silence. He stared at me across the wreckage of his life, his face gray, defeated. No words came, no defense left. I took a long breath, turned back to my son. Come on, baby, I said, squeezing his hand. We don't belong here. Together, we stood up. We walked through the ballroom, past the stunned faces, past the broken centerpieces and overturned glasses, past the hollow wreckage of a wedding that was never built on love to begin with. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The door of the reception hall closed softly behind us. The laughter, the gasps, the chaos, all of it stayed on the other side. I felt Tyler's small hand gripping mine tightly, warm and steady, like an anchor. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed cheeks. I took the deepest breath I'd taken in what felt like years. You okay, Mom? Tyler asked, his voice soft, concerned. I crouched down, level with his bright blue eyes, and brushed a strand of hair away from his forehead. I am now, I said. And for the first time in a long, long time, I meant it. We got into the waiting cab. As it pulled away from the hotel where my humiliation had been staged but my dignity reclaimed, I didn't once turn back. I wasn't walking away from defeat. I was walking toward freedom. The weeks that followed were nothing short of a whirlwind. Word of what happened at the wedding spread through the community faster than I could have imagined. The same people who used to avoid eye contact with me at the grocery store now stopped me to shake my hand. You stood your ground, one woman told me. Your boy. He's braver than most men I know, said another. At the Maple Diner, where I'd spent over a decade pouring coffee and balancing plates, the regulars looked at me differently. Not with pity, with respect. Then one afternoon, Mr. Hartman, the owner of the diner, called me into his office. I wiped my hands on my apron, my heart racing. I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. You've been here over 10 years, he began, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed thoughtfully. Always the first to show up, the last to leave. You never complained. Never backed down. You've shown more strength than anyone I know. I stayed quiet, unsure where this was going. I think it's about time you had something more to show for it, he continued. Jennifer, I'd like to promote you. Deputy manager, if you're willing. I blinked, stunned. Me? Mr. Hartman smiled. Yes, you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The tears I'd held back for so long now prickled behind my eyes, but this time they weren't tears of humiliation. They were tears of pride. Thank you, I whispered. Michael's life began to crumble almost immediately after the wedding scandal. His company quietly let him go once the truth about the affair and the theft of company funds surfaced. His so-called friends turned their backs. His reputation, ruined. Caroline packed up and moved out of town, raising the child she had once so cruelly bragged about, now alone, experiencing the life she had mocked me for. And Beverly, the proud matriarch who had built her social world on status and perfection, found herself abandoned. No one wanted to be associated with her anymore. The same guests who once fought for an invitation to her parties now crossed the street to avoid her. Then one evening, a letter arrived at my apartment. I knew the handwriting immediately. The expensive stationery, Beverly. I was wrong about everything, it read. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I am truly sorry. I stared at the letter for a long time. Then I picked up my pen and wrote back. I can let the past go, but that doesn't mean I will ever forget. I mailed the letter the next morning and felt lighter as I slipped it into the mailbox. Life didn't magically become easy after that, but something inside me had shifted. I enrolled in night classes at the local community college. 3 days a week after my shifts at the diner, I sat in a classroom again, working toward the nutrition degree I'd once put aside for marriage, for motherhood, for survival. Each class felt like another piece of myself coming back. And Tyler? He blossomed. His teachers noticed the change right away: more confidence, more curiosity, less afraid to speak up. One afternoon, he came home beaming, waving a certificate in the air. Mom, I won the class debate. I hugged him tight, laughing. That's amazing, sweetheart. What was the topic? Standing up for what's right, he said, his eyes shining. My heart swelled so much I thought it might burst. The small apartment that had once felt like just survival now felt like home. Our home. A home we were building, not out of fear, but out of choice, out of strength. One evening, as I was studying at the kitchen table, Tyler sat across from me, chin resting on his hands, watching me flip through my textbook. Mom, he asked thoughtfully, could you own a restaurant one day? I looked up, surprised. A restaurant? Yeah, he said, his smile bright. You're really good at this? And you know so much about food. Why not? I laughed softly, ruffling his hair. You know what? Maybe I can. Good, he grinned. Because when you do, I'll be your first customer. Deal. That night, as we curled up on the couch, sharing a bowl of popcorn, watching one of his favorite movies, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the absence of struggle, but the presence of hope. We had been through the worst: humiliation, betrayal, heartbreak. But instead of breaking us, it built us. It taught us that no matter how hard they tried to make us feel small, we were never less. We were enough. We are enough. And our story was only just beginning.